It is important to understand when you're talking about ancient remains that sometimes samples can be excluded due to the quality of the sample, but most of the time it has nothing to do with that. The usual reason that most samples tend to be excluded from analysis is related to the fact that most researchers are hypothesis testing, not doing pure exploratory analysis. And the difference is pretty straightforward. Most research is testing a hypothesis, meaning there's a prediction or an assumption about what's going to happen, and then you are testing that assumption with data. That is very different than exploratory analysis, where you gather all your data and you're just trying to figure out what you're going to find or trying to see what emerges. The Nieves Colon piece is a pure example of hypothesis testing, and I'm going to show you how. In the introduction, the researchers state, based on the similarities in material culture, the age populations may have originated in South America, Central America, or the Istmo Colombian region. So here they are telling you what their assumption is, what their belief is. Their belief is that the indigenous samples in Puerto Rico came from Central America or South America. So this means they are not gathering the data and looking to see where the pre-contact populations fall. They are telling you very clearly, we believe, based on the literature, based on whatever, but we believe that they came from Central America and South America. And when you go down to their methods section and they start talking about all the statistical analyses they run, they explain very clearly they are only ever comparing to what is considered Native American data. So down here, they talk about only using Native American haplotypes. Here they talk about running different analyses, both mtDNA and autosomal DNA, again, only with Native American populations. And as I talked about this 1,000,000,001 times, the issue with this is due to a priori categorization, which means that these groups have already been labeled based on social and political reasons, historical reasons that have nothing to do with genetics. So they are only comparing the ancient remains to groups that have already been labeled Native American or indigenous, or their genetics have been labeled that to fit a specific profile. When it comes to groups that are African or African descended, those aren't included at all, except as an outgroup, where you have our YRI, which is Yoruba, and that's considered an outgroup. Problem with using the Nigerians population reference group as an outgroup is that when you use an outgroup, you are saying that that group is fundamentally different from the groups that you are comparing, that there is no way that they can be related at all. For example, we're trying to figure out how humans were related in terms of mtDNA. Neanderthal was used as an outgroup because Neanderthal is considered completely different from Homo sapiens. Same thing when we were looking at how to group humanity with our closest primate neighbors. Chimpanzee was used as an outgroup because the assumption is chimpanzee is a completely different species than modern humans. So we don't know the affinity for African or European or Asian, but very specifically any African or African descended groups, because African is considered a completely different genetic group that cannot possibly be related to these people. So the bias is in the methodology before anything is even analyzed. By choosing hypothesis testing over exploratory analysis again and again, especially when it comes to ancient remains, we see that researchers are just reinforcing historical narratives that have already been sold to us. By excluding European, Asian, using African groups as an outgroup, we actually never know how these groups cluster together or who they're genetically closer to. It's all done and it's all rigged so that the populations that they assume are indigenous are rigged to win. If Nieves Colon was actually doing exploratory testing, then we would have seen that the majority of samples actually have H2A2A1 maternal haplogroups, not the traditional indigenous ones.